when I found out I was pregnant for the third time, the first thing we did was have a budget meeting.
Which is excellent.
Yeah. Because and I was like, right, how are we going to, because I knew, because I'd learnt so much about postpartum support and the value of it and blah, blah, blah. I knew exactly what I wanted for my, that third postpartum, but we needed to have a conversation about how we're going to make this happen. And we needed to start putting that in the budget right from, the beginning of pregnancy.
Yeah. Hi everyone, and welcome back to No Place Like Home. We're here today with Katie Parker, who we chatted with a few episodes ago. I'm Jess. We've got Larissa.
Hello.
We're going to talk with Katie today about navigating postpartum relationships. This is a big one. It's a juicy one.
It is.
So, Katie, you're very well versed in all of this. I guess a good starting point could be what kind of conversations, assuming you're having a child with someone, what kind of conversations should you be having before your baby arrives?
Great. No, it's such a great question, because so many of us would not have, it would not have even occurred to us that there were conversations that we needed to have.
I certainly didn't.
Me neither.
No.
Me neither. Okay. For a start, I think it's really helpful to have a conversation with your partner. So we're assuming that, you've got a partner that you're having this child with. Really great conversation to have is reflecting back on your own childhood and thinking about what were the parts of how you were parented that you want to bring into your own parenthood journey.
Yeah.
And what parts do you want to leave behind?
Yeah.
And that's a really helpful starting point, I suppose, to work out what sort of parents you want to be.
That's incredible, Katie. I just feel like so much would come from that, just that in itself.
Yeah, like it's a powerful question.
It really is.
Yeah, and it's not often that we would reflect on that. So I think that's a really great starting point. In saying that, I also want to acknowledge that so many of us enter parenthood with probably an idealised version of what sort of parent we're going to be.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen in reality. So, we can have perhaps quite rigid ideas around we're not going to let this happen, or we'll be this type of parent or whatever, having these rules. And I think it's also good to enter parenthood with, an element of flexibility and also an understanding that we don't know what this little precious human is going to be. We don't know what type of, what their temperament's going to be like or their personality, or we just don't know, any of those things. So obviously we do need to, maintain some flexibility around that. But I think that's a really helpful starting point, thinking about, what about your childhood? What are your favourite memories of childhood? What things did you really, are really strong memories for you, and what sort of memories would you like to create, for your children and your family? So that's often a good place to start. I think entering parenthood with the expectation that there are going to be challenges in your relationship. I think entering parenthood thinking that, we've had all the conversations in pregnancy, therefore we're going to be, we're so in love and,
we're so connected.
We're so, and it often is in pregnancy, it can be a really...
I've never been more in love with my husband as I was when I was pregnant with both of our kids.
Really connective time. So I think if we just expect that it's not always all going to be smooth sailing, that can help us adapt to when things do, when tensions do arise, we can acknowledge that, this is a normal part of being in relationship, and not catastrophize and think and, be packing the suitcase and that's it, we've had a fight, that must mean he doesn't love me anymore,
it's
and
over.
And we're leaving as we were sharing before. We've both had some personal experiences of that. So I think, just expecting that there'll be challenges and having some tools, I suppose, to manage them as they crop up, like thinking about that in advance. So, one really helpful strategy can be one really important element to a postpartum relationship is communication, clearly. Really, really important. So a strategy around maintaining that communication, having regular communication, can be scheduling some sort of weekly check-in or something. So, you know, for my partner and I, you know, it was Sunday night check-in where we'd be, and look, this was not in postpartum, this was later on once once we'd done a bit of work on our relationship and things had improved a bit. But having that regular opportunity that's in the diary that, you know, you can both speak your mind honestly, you know, share about how each of you are feeling. Your phones away.
Yeah.
I can't stress this this enough with how much what a negative impact phones and other devices have on relationships. And so we really want to create those opportunities where there's no other distractions, where you are sitting, you know, face to face with your partner and you are listening, you're actively listening to them, you're reflecting back what they heard and approaching those conversations from a place of curiosity, you know, seeking to understand their perspective rather than a place, so many of us, you know, would come from a place of defensiveness. And, you know, hearing everything they say as like criticism or judgment, really, approaching it more from an open-hearted sort of place, I suppose. So, yeah, that would be, and giving each other opportunities, to share how you're feeling about just life in general, about the relationship, and also what each other's needs are as well. Because as we all know, you know, bring a child into a relationship and it can be pretty quick for our, you know, the parents' needs to drop to the bottom of the list. And I think it's really important that we're having these open conversations with each other about what each other's needs are and working together. And this often takes compromise of getting to a place where both of your needs are being met. So, you know, as an example, on our Sunday night check-ins, we will, it's a very practical, you know, as well as checking in with each other's feelings, it's also a very practical sort of exercise in opening the diary or having the calendar in front of you for the week and going, right, what do we each have on? Where are you getting your exercise? Where am I getting mine? Where are you doing something for yourself, your hobby or your leisure time or your time out or whatever? Rest, time with friends, where am I getting that? And then where's time for us as a couple? Like where are we we putting that in? And I know, the fourth one would be then where are we getting some family time as well? You know, is it Sunday family day, or is there something in there that you're, my kids are a bit older now, board games are our thing. We love board game nights or, you know, a movie night or something like that or going to the beach today or planning little trips away and that sort of thing where it's just, you know, just you as a family. And I know I'm really conscious when I say that that's a lot of things I've just listed to fit into a week. And not every week you're going to fit in everything. But I think where you're having weekly check-ins, then you can be on top of it. So if you didn't get that thing that week, then at least you know,
it flows over into the next.
We'll put it into the next week. And, you know, I'm sure we've all had the situation where you might have planned that yoga class or whatever the thing you were going to be doing, and then something happens. You know, you end up being sick or your child's sick or for what, you know, something falls down and it doesn't happen. And I think we can be quick to enter that place of resentment and why do I even bother? You know, that sort of thing. I think when we can again approach that really flexibly and go, okay, it didn't work out this time. But when is it going? Okay, we'll reschedule that, and that's going back in, you know, next Wednesday morning or something. You know, making sure that we can just keep things in perspective and go, okay, it didn't work out that time. You know, where can we reschedule that? So communication has got to be like one of the you know,
the biggest keys,
the biggest things. In terms of maintaining that connection. Sorry, I realise I've gone off on a tangent. More to answer your question about the conversations you're having in pregnancy, I think it's really important to have a conversation around finances.
And I just want to add, and I know this is probably a really controversial statement, and I feel like maybe I put this in Life After Birth, but then we took it out. I'd have to check. I truly believe that if you can't have a conversation about money with the person you're having a child with, then you probably shouldn't be having a child with them. Like if money is that taboo in your relationship, then there's a really big problem there. There should be no issue talking about money.
Yeah, and it's really important because we know from the research that like the conflicts in relationship, like money is the cause of, I can't remember percentages or anything, but it's a really, high contributing factor to tensions in relationships. So it is really important to have those conversations early on. And I think I shared in a previous episode that when I found out I was pregnant for the third time, the first thing we did was have a budget meeting.
Which is excellent.
Yeah. Because and I was like, right, how are we going to, because I knew, because I'd learnt so much about postpartum support and the value of it and blah, blah, blah. I knew exactly what I wanted for my, that third postpartum, but we needed to have a conversation about how we're going to make this happen. And we needed to start putting that in the budget right from, the beginning of pregnancy.
Yeah.
So I think that's really clear, and having those conversations around, well, what's important to you, because when we come into a relationship with someone, we each bring our own stuff, right? Like we've got all our own childhood stories and experiences and values and beliefs and assumptions and all these sorts of things. So it's really important that we're open about what we're both sort of bringing to the table there.
Elaine de Botton actually says, when you meet someone, one of the first things you should share are the ways in which you're crazy. Rather than being with someone for a year or two and then, that stuff coming out. It's like, let's talk about this now.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, that's got nothing to do with finances, but just it felt relevant.
Yeah. I feel like the conversation that you initially have with your partner is just this overarching, do you want to have children? And it's a yes, no. And then that's sort of where it stops. So I think it's awesome that we're talking about sort of what are the conversations beyond that.
Yeah.
Because I think people, I know I certainly felt like, well, okay, we both want to have children, so okay, we'll keep having a relationship. Like, we'll keep doing this. But I think, Katie, if you can talk a bit around what training you've done in this space, and then maybe do you have services that couples could engage with if someone's listening to this and they're feeling a bit overwhelmed?
Yeah, absolutely.
How they could engage with your services?
Yes, so there's a fantastic book called Becoming Us by Ellie Taylor, who's an Australian relationship counsellor. She's amazing. So I have done her Becoming Us facilitation training.
Okay.
So that book alone is a fabulous resource.
I need to look it up. I want to read it.
Really great book. So I think would be my recommendation for all pregnant couples.
We can have that in our bookshelf
to read
at home.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, and if you were wanting more tailored, individually tailored support around that, then yes, that's something that I offer. There are groups, there are Becoming Us group programs. Some people run them as group programs that you could join. I don't offer groups at this stage, so it would be more
just
one-on-one
couples.
And I mean, even at the very least, having a postpartum planning session where we can cover some of this sort of stuff.
Yes.
Another great resource is it's called What About Us? It's a really cute little book by Karen Kleiman. She's a social worker.
Okay.
In the States, I think. Yeah, and it's this lovely book that there's an illustration on every page, little cartoon sort of thing, and it just covers so many different topics about everything related to having a relationship and bringing a baby into a relationship. And there's little tidbits of advice sort of on each page, but really the cartoons share a story, really relatable sort of little scenarios that you might come across in your relationship. So that's a really fantastic resource. I'm also I haven't completed my training yet, but I'm undertaking training to become a Gottman method couples therapist.
What's that?
So Drs. John and Julie Gottman over in the US, they are like their what would you call it? Model of, they've done decades and decades of research into relationships, and that's basically the gold standard of relationship therapy, couple therapy. Yeah.
I wanted to actually bring that up earlier when you were talking about communication, because they say there's the bids for attention, and there's so when you talked about putting your phones away, it's they apparently, and I might get this not quite right, but they can tell by the way a couple respond to one another with these bids for attention. If you look up from what you're doing and respond to your partner, like 90% of the time or whatever it is, then you're going to be a more successful couple than the people who just keep watching the show or keep reading their book or keep looking at their phone and scrolling on TikTok.
Absolutely. So it's bids of connection.
Bids for connection.
Yeah. And so they talk about turning towards.
Yes.
And so that would be phone away, engaging, making
Stop
eye
what you're
contact.
doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Responding in a positive way. And then there's turning away.
Yeah.
And then there's turning against. So turning away is sort of more the ignoring, like didn't really register what you just said sort of thing. And the turning against is actually
the
making
going,
it, like
going into battle mode.
Like sort of like
defensiveness.
Yeah, defensiveness, or rolling the eyes, or you're making a sort of negative
I just
remark.
roll my eyes at the thought of someone rolling their eyes.
Yeah.
And so then that works in a way that you would work with a couple by breaking down all of these turning away, turning again. You would identify that through the process, sitting down with you.
Yeah,
and becoming aware, having the
it's bringing
awareness
of it. To how you're responding. And so, it's around education of, both people in the relationship around, the importance of the turning towards.
Yeah.
And you're right. The research is very clear that, the more you're turning towards, the more,
because I've heard
stronger your relationship
the theory of the 5 horsemen.
4 horsemen, yeah.
4 horsemen.
Yes.
Yeah. I added another one. Clearly, I've got another horseman somewhere.
I'm sure we could find it.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll find it.
Yeah,
It sounds like a similar sort of
so
theory.
that's the Gottman theory.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So Gottman website would be a fantastic resource. Lots of great.
What about love languages? Is that something you think is important?
Yeah, look, it's funny you ask that because I've never been that. It's not something I tend to bring up.
Go to
in a big, like I think it is worth mentioning though. Like I think it is worth being aware of what your love language may be
and what your partner's is.
Yes, having conversation. Like I haven't actually, to be honest, I haven't read the book, but I'm aware of what they are, and I think it is. It's worthwhile definitely being aware of it. Yeah,
because I know she's very controversial, but the holistic psychologist has gone on to identify another 5 love languages. And it's things like, I can't remember all of them, but it's things like knowing each other's trauma responses, knowing each other's trees and stuff like that. And I mean, it's so important, right, to know these things about the person that you're going to raise a family with. And yet often we just go in so blind.
We do. And, it is a bit embarrassing to admit, but like this is something that it's taken, my eldest is almost 9. And it's like my relationship currently is the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
But for a long time there, we're on shaky ground.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've learnt through years. I think, to have this understanding of someone back in pregnancy before you bring a child into the relationship would be really, gosh, it would make for smoother sailing, once the child's born. But even things like, now if I'm getting really upset or angry about something, like my partner knows that I just need some time. I need some time away. He will say, "Why don't you go for a walk?"
Yeah.
And I know that by the time I've walked around the block, been out in nature, I've got and I come back in and I can just enter that conversation in such a different, from such a different perspective. So it's just like learning those little things about each other. Yeah. But you don't know that unless you talk about it.
And also you don't. Some couples get pregnant and they've never had a fight. And you don't truly know someone until you know their fighting style, right? So it's it's a lot.
Yeah. Something else that has come up, and my partner's all over this now. Again, something he's learned about me, but sometimes I can react from this very triggered state, and he knows however I've just responded is a huge overreaction. And he'll say, "What else is going on? I know you can't be that upset." He's like, What's happened? What else is there? Like, what's underneath? That
looking beyond the behaviour.
Exactly like we do with our children, right?
Yeah.
So
it's almost that recommitment to each other, though, isn't it? Because it's such a different phase of your relationship with your partner, and you go through this process of reflecting on my own experience of okay, this is how we do it. This is how we're supposed to be doing it, right? And we've got the white picket fence, and we've got the, all of the things, and we're ticking the boxes. And then something like, for me, postnatal depression just throws all of that way out the door. And I think for us, we we mumbled our way through that and got to the other side. But then there was still that, okay, well, we reconvene as to the social expectations of our relationship. And then you sort of have to hit that shaky, well, for us, we had to hit that shaky ground to go, well, we're either doing this or we're not. And it's that recommitment to each other to have those conversations that we probably should have had when we were pregnant, to be like, okay, this is a new chapter for us. This is like a new beginning for us. And how do we want this to look?
And it can feel really uncomfortable to be that vulnerable with a partner if there hasn't been that level of vulnerability in the relationship before. So I would encourage anyone, because some people might hear that and go, oh, that feels like
exactly
awkward. How would I bring up some of these conversations? And I would just encourage you to sit with the uncomfortability, and the discomfort of that awkwardness, because the more you can have the awkward conversations, the less awkward it becomes over time. So
and it actually feels good once you do it. And once you're both accepting of that conversation, there's like this quiet appreciation for the openness that you've sort of come to the table with. I know that's what John and I certainly
And you mentioned before in another episode, I think it was, you've done Lailstone's Immersion. Another fantastic course that she has is a couples course, and it's a self-paced. And my partner and I actually did that together several years ago. And that is a fantastic resource because it actually talks you through, like it guides you through, I think it's 8 modules or something, and each module guides you through different, aspects. And it has these, this list of prompts. Yeah. So it actually, because sometimes you don't even know what questions to ask or how to have these conversations, whereas this course so beautifully guides you through that process of like what to ask each other. And when we did that, we discovered things about each other we had no idea about.
So beautiful.
And you think you know your partner so intimately, and yet there's still so much to learn about each other, isn't there? And I think in the previous episode we spoke about the fair play cards. Yes. Because I think talking about the division of labour in the home is so important. Should couples be talking about that?
Absolutely. It's very clear from research that, when a couple, even where there was equitable division of labour, of household tasks pre-kids, after kids, there's this huge gap. Like if in a heterosexual relationship, for example, women are doing 5 hours more of domestic labour a week than men. Like there's a really big discrepancy.
Just you know default. What? Even Esther Perel had a same-sex couple on her podcast, and she found that division of labour, or the lack of equality in the division of labour, existed just depending on what roles these women were playing. So the one that was staying at home versus the one that was going to work. Even though they were both women, the one that was staying at home still found themselves doing more labour. So that's really interesting. Just, it doesn't matter what type of relationship you're in, being at home versus being out of the home, there's that huge discrepancy.
Yes, and so much of that plays in how we've been socialised.
Yes.
As to what's expected. Yeah, I think it's really important to recognise how we've each person from the relationship has been socialised into their gender roles as well. So, for example, women have typically seen, and this is obviously this is a generalisation, but, we know that women have generally seen their mothers take on, the bulk of the household labour, and they've seen their fathers go off to work and come home and expect the dinner to be on the table. So if that's been your imprinting around that growing up, then that's sort of how it plays out by default. So I think the fair play cards are such an amazing tool, and there's also the book that you can read or listen to on Audible that goes along with the cards, but it's such a great opportunity to make those things, like make the invisible visible, basically. Because until your partner sees how much of the mental load you're carrying and all those little things that you do during the day that you probably don't even realise, are contributing to your stress and overwhelm and exhaustion. The process of playing this card game together can really make that invisible mental load visible, and can help to even things out a little bit. Yeah. So it's a really, really great resource.
Yeah, I mean, I can also speak to the fact, I think we've spoken about this in the past on this podcast. I'm the main worker in my home at the moment, and my husband is studying, but he's also the main carer of our kids, and he does way more housework than me, and that's also our personalities. But it's been interesting to watch him also now have to take on the mental load of being home with the children, and the little things like swimming lessons, remembering to pay the invoice for swimming lessons, appointments, so many things that just school uniform. There's still a lot that I take care of in the mental load realm, but it's been interesting to watch him have to learn how to navigate that and realise how much work it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about that card game is like if you pull the swimming lesson card, you are involved, you're responsible for every aspect of that. So that is, yes, researching which swimming school you're going to go to, booking them in, having the bathers and the towel and the goggles and the things that you need, and every aspect of that task you take responsibility for.
We at home, HOMB, we obviously want to invite the opportunity for the partners to stay with the person who's staying at home. Would that be a really great thing for us to incorporate as having these cards as a really kind of nice, gentle way of, okay, well, what does it look like when you go home, guys? Like, how are we going to, what would you recommend? Yeah?
Yeah, I really do. And I think the sooner you having these conversations as a couple, the better.
Yeah.
And it really should be happening from birth or,
when you're pregnant. But if I'm just thinking in the cases of most people, unfortunately, not having these conversations, if we're finding that, the people who are staying with us, we're like, this conversation hasn't been had, or, how can we encourage it?
But even if it has, I think the conversations need to be ongoing, right? Like you can't just talk about something once.
Yeah, it is. You're right, Jess. It's an ongoing conversation. I think, I think at any stage, introducing those cards would be great. And the earlier the better, really. So if
definitely.
I'd definitely encourage.
And then I guess before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you if, and this is a big one, if you haven't had these conversations, if you find yourself in this relationship where you're just at odds with each other, you're struggling to communicate, how do you repair? Is there room to repair?
Yeah, absolutely. And repair is so important. Like I said right at the beginning, anticipating that you're going to have challenges is helps, I suppose, to bridge that gap between expectation and reality when they actually arise. So yes, and repair is such a huge part of that. So coming back together, communication, it always comes back to communication, doesn't it? And communicating around your needs and what's happened there, and also looking at what was the cause of the conflict. And so often, and my partner and I have reflected on this, so often it is each other's, like my expectations were up here and he didn't meet them.
Yeah.
So it's actually, so whereas if I can clearly communicate what my expectations are and we can have a conversation around that, whether or not they're reasonable or not, then that helps so much for him to know, where he sits in it all. Otherwise, he's constantly feeling like he's not enough. He's not living up to my expectations, and then, conflict arises.
Yeah,
so
you get defensive and...
Yeah, so actually unpacking what was the cause of the conflict and how can we... Yeah, and reconnection, like just coming back to reconnection. And I think, we know, particularly in the newborn days, but this can go on for years.
Yeah.
Days can turn into weeks, can turn into months, can turn into years.
And resentment can build if you're not talking about it. And it's like this snowball.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having those points of reconnection. Yeah. And at the end, if you've got a partner that's working outside of the home, or even if they're working in the, at the end of the day, reconnecting as a couple. Yeah. And I can think back to postpartum where I was like throwing the baby at my partner the second he walked in the door, and I wouldn't have even made eye contact with him, let alone spoken to him, other than like, this is what needs to happen. Whereas then once I became more aware of what, how I was greeting him like no wonder he's going to walk in and feel crap, and that just sets up this awfulness, for the rest of the evening. Whereas when we became aware of our patterning there, we could actually just make eye contact, have a hug.
Yeah.
And it literally, that was all it took, really.
Yeah,
and
connection.
asking each other one question about the day or something.
Just
that
softens.
It just made such a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for our kids to see that as well. I'm always thinking, what are we modeling to our children?
Yes.
Yeah. About healthy relationships and repair, the rupture and repair.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Like we practice the rupture and repair thing with our children. We need to also practice it with our partners. And this is coming back to what Elaine de Botton says in The Course of Love, which I think is a brilliant book. It's a novel. It's a nonfiction novel, but then he psychoanalyzes the couple. So he has their story and then there's the psychoanalysis of what's going on. And I just think it's so brilliant. And I think that every new family should read this book because it's so amazing. And he talks about if you treated your partner like a toddler when they're dysregulated, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you need to go to the toilet? Do you need a cuddle? Like what's going on for you? Rather than that reactiveness. And something we talk about in Life After Birth is coming at conflicts with the story in my head is. So rather than accusing someone of you did this and it's the story in my head is when you don't do the dishes, you don't value the fact that I really need the kitchen to be clean for my mental health, whatever it is,
that's such an important point. Yes. Asking yourself, what am I making this mean? My partner hasn't done this thing that I expected. What's the story I'm telling myself about?
What's the story in my head?
And generally it's like he doesn't care, he doesn't respect me, he doesn't appreciate me, or
it's taking the blame off them, and then there's less room for defensiveness. Yes, because you're being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
so depersonalizing it.
Yeah.
And actually it's the problem that's the problem. It's not the person that's the problem. And actually, that can be a really helpful reframe as well.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, we could talk about this all day.
I know there's so many more things, but I'm like, no, Larissa, just thank you so much, Katie.
Now. Thank you, Katie. As per usual, to our beautiful listeners, if you have any questions for us or for Katie, please let us know in the comments on Spotify, on Instagram. We're here to answer it all. And we will link Katie's info in our show notes so you can find her.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks. It's been so lovely being here.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.